In my personal experience, there are stages you go through when you get clean from an addiction or quit a bad habit. Now, keep in mind as I talk through this video, I'm referring to both a substance or a compulsive behavior that is considered an addiction. Both are considered addictions. My definition of addiction that I'm using for this video is going to be the perpetual and compulsive overconsumption of a substance or behavior that causes issues for the person experiencing it. So the first stage of the addiction is going to be one still worth mentioning but small, which is casual use. Keep in mind, all of these stages are going to be unclear to the person when they're in them, whether they're in the stage they think they're in, or the stage after, or even the stage before. So some people are able to stay casual users of a substance or behavior that isn't good for them, and it never becomes a problem for them. Now, before becoming an addict, it's impossible to be able to tell whether you're going to be in this group of people or whether you're going to be in the smaller group of people that will become addicts. Once you've been casually using for a period of time, you reach a point where you ask yourself, would I be able to stop if I wanted to or if I tried? Now, when you ask yourself this question, usually this is when the denial starts. You might try and quit to prove to yourself that you can do it. You might fail. You might deny that you couldn't and believe that you could quit at any point when you tried. You just don't want to. Or on the other hand, you could just never try and believe to yourself that you could quit if you wanted to. Now, this is why it's unclear which step you're in. And it's also why addiction is such an insidious thing, because you don't really know, there's no clear markers for what stage you're in, and so you can slowly slip from stage to stage to stage without even realizing what's happening. And that's why I'm making this video, to make it clear to you what the stages that, in my opinion, everyone goes through are, so that you can identify maybe what stage you're in, what stages you've been through, and how to go on and go out of it. So after you've tried to quit but you can't, you then go to a stage which takes a long time to get to, but eventually, after using for a long time, I think probably in the magic stage of use, where you think it's magic. Then you hit rock bottom. You reach the point where the drug's not doing anything for you, your tolerance is extremely high, and no matter how much you take, you're just not going to get that same feeling anymore. And I've been further rock bottom, because rock bottom can always go lower, is when you can't even afford to, or even you don't even have any of the drug, or are able to access the behavior that you are going to, that you desperately want to do. At this stage, you probably aren't willing to quit. You're probably thinking to yourself, this feeling that I'm feeling of wanting to do this addictive substance or behavior but not have any or be able to get any for a long time is so unbearable that I need to do anything I can to not feel this feeling ever again. So you come up with a solution, and it's a bit of a half-assed solution, but to you it makes the most sense and gives you some confidence. So you decide to get as much as possible of the substance, or increase your access to this behavior as much as possible so that you will never run out again. So in the never running out again stage, you create a stockpile, and you can use as much as you want, and the starting stage of it is really enjoyable because your tolerance is low because you've spent some time off of it through your rock bottom, and obviously it comes with a lot of hard work to build yourself back up and get so much of the addictive thing, but eventually you're doing really well in terms of your stockpiles, and you decide that the way to create an even bigger stockpile is to lower your use. And you realize that at higher uses, your tolerance goes up anyway. So the subjective high that you get from doing whatever it is you're doing is roughly as equal as high as if you just took less consistently. So you lower and lower and lower until you sort of reach a point where you could stay at that point and maintain for a very long time. Maybe you might go up over periods and go down over periods, but generally you have a general sticking point. At this stage, you start to realize that if I use more, my tolerance will go up and my high won't even go up. And if I use less, I won't get as high and I'll withdraw more. And you start to think about the effort that it takes to keep pursuing increasing your stockpiles. And you start to ask yourself, could I live a better life? Would it be easier to do what I'm trying to do if I just wasn't on it? Now, this is a hard stage to get to. It's usually the turning point for a lot of people where they just sort of stay at that maintenance phase. But for anyone, if they use for long enough, they'll realize that if I use less, like anywhere from 0 to less than I'm using right now, it's not gonna be worth it. And if I use any more, it's not gonna be worth it. And maybe I'm just better off without it. And this is when you first think about quitting. Complete abstinence, never using again. And that's scary. But at some point in your mind, you make a decision. I want to quit. From here, you start to reduce your use, And this is when coping with life becomes harder. So for me, what I started doing when I first said this to myself, I wanted to quit, was I started visiting my drug counselor. And that was really helpful. It's when you have to start learning to cope without it, because life isn't livable without it at that point. And you have to slowly build up new ways of coping. And I know this is hard to hear for anyone who's not at that stage, but trust me, I've been through them all. So you start reducing your use, and you get pretty low, and your stockpiles are going up even more because you're still stocking up and using even less. And you realize that you have more than you know what to do with, where it becomes a liability to maintain, where just keeping this flow of having this much of, or this amount of access to this much of the drug, or this amount of access to the behavior, is dangerous. So at some point you realize, well, I'm never even going to use this much of it in my life again. So you get rid of most of your stockpiles. You leave yourself with a small finite amount, and you say, okay, I'm only going to do this much ever again. At this point, you start to go through the stage of breaking up how much you use as a percentage of what you have left. And to be honest, it gets harder and harder, but naturally this is going to be easier than just one day trying to go cold turkey. Once you go cold turkey, I don't know many people who've succeeded with it, but it's not what I did. I went through these stages. So you get to your last use and you run out, and this is when the real emotional work comes in. This is when you've got to be doing it the most. This time, at this point, you're really fighting demons, and it's real stuff. Like, it's not cringe, because it's not a joke. It's serious. It's serious. So now you don't have any more of the substance, or can't access the behavior, and maybe you go into a rehab or something like that. Maybe you start going to anonymous groups, whatever it is, and you now have to try not to lapse, because at this point you've probably made it far enough that you don't want to relapse anymore. You've learned your lesson from all of the stages, and you just got to not lapse. So it's harder to lapse, because you have to actually gain access to the drug. So it takes quite a lot of planned behavior to actually do it again. So from this stage, you could lapse 1 to X amount of times, who knows? And once again, this is where you don't really know what stage you're on, because maybe you're in the stage where you've had your last lapse, or maybe you're going to lapse again 100 more times. But each time you learn something from it, and even to get to the point where you're convinced that any use again will be a lapse and not a relapse. I had to do, personally, I had to do a lot of work on looking at the two minds you have when you're an addict, the clean mind and the addict mind, and really discerning whether you just discerning that your clean mind's still there and you're not doomed if you use again. It doesn't mean that you're going to relapse just because every time you've used again, once you quit, you relapsed. And it's a difficult battle between shaming yourself and feeling worse because you're shaming yourself, and that leading to relapse, and feeling bad that you've done it so that you don't do it again, but still telling yourself you're still okay even though you've done the worst thing you could possibly do at this stage in your life. So those are the stages. Who knows if you ever will be on the last one, or if you are on the last one now. You'll never know until you're dead. But all we can do is try and keep moving forward through the stages and get to the end, whether we know it or not. But the reason why this video is about fighting your addiction demon is because there are those two minds that I spoke about, the clean mind and the addict mind. And when you start off going through these stages, most of your mind is your addict mind. And I'll put up somewhere some of the different characteristics of each mind, so you can sort of identify which one you are at certain times and which one you're using to do whatever it is you're doing. So as you go through, you start off mostly with the addiction mind, as I said, and when you're going through these stages, so say the rock bottom stage, going to the stage where you never run out again, you are using you're rationalizing with your addict mind why you need to go to this next step. But the next step will actually lead you to a cleaner mind. So at the start, just like it's a weird cycle that gets you into addiction, it's a weird cycle that gets you out, and you kind of have to crack it. So the more you use your addict mind to do something that you think is going to basically satisfy your addict mind more, and it actually is bringing you towards a cleaner mind, the more that cycle continues and becomes exponential, so that you can gain back your clean mind. And it is a fight between these two minds, and going through these steps is how you fight that addict mind demon, if you want to call it that. And yeah, that's my take on addiction. This is just version 1. It'll get better, only get better as I upload more versions. But yeah, some of these ideas, especially, for example, the definition at the start, is from the book Dopamine Nation by unhelpful. It's an amazing book. I recommend it. But the stages and the explanations I give are from the heart, not scripted. This is my take on it, and I've had a lot of experience with it. And I really consciously thought about this stuff a lot, and this is my take on it. And maybe as I get better at speaking to the camera, I'll come up with better and better versions, so stay tuned because it only gets better. Thanks for listening, and I feel for you. I know how hard it is. Maybe I don't know specifically how hard it is for you, but I know how hard it was for me. And if it's anything like that for you, then I really feel for you, for sure. Keep fighting, keep going through the stages. Maybe one day there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, but if there isn't for you now, then that's what faith is. Faith is going on, and hope and faith is going on and believing there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even when there isn't, even when there is no hope and when there is no faith. And if you're at a stage as dark as I was in, that's the only way you're going to get out. So I wish you the best of luck, and maybe I'll see you next time.